All right, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for coming. The EdFirstPV's forum for current candidates for PVPUSD school board on the November ballot. My name is Alan Barton. I'm a community member and a supporter of EdFirstPV. I've lived here for 6 years, although my wife grew up here in the community. We have 3 kids in the system at Rancho Vista, Merrill Est, and PV High. So we're pretty familiar with the issues that are confronting all those areas of the school. As you are no doubt aware, there are 4 candidates for 2 seats that are open on the board, and 2 of the 4 candidates are actually sitting here in front of us. The 4 candidates are Ghandi, who's the current board president. She's seeking re-election. Alegria, Jeremy Vanderhal, sitting right there, and Alexandria Blumer, who's sitting right here. So just for protocol, I will read the statements provided by Ami and Eric in declining to be here. Ami, while I would like to meet with all community members, I'll be unable to participate due to pending litigation against myself and the district. That is her statement. We asked Ms. Ghandi to clarify how pending litigation has impacted her ability to run her campaign, and she has provided no further information. Obviously, on the Thursday night, there's no board meeting, and I've never heard of any kind of litigation that would prevent a public servant from speaking to the public on any matter, other than perhaps the exact matter under litigation. Eric Alegria, due to my planned participation in the League of Women's Voters candidate forum, which occurred a week ago, this Thursday last week, I will not be participating in this event. I will leave the conclusions you want to make on those 2 declinations. All right, so some basic rules that are pretty standard. We're gonna have to give each candidate here both opening and closing statements. Because it's just the 2 of them and it's a fairly intimate event, we're not going to be super strict on the clock. Say what you want to say. Ideally, 2-minute answers per candidate. Each candidate will switch off as the first person to answer each question. Each candidate will obviously get a chance to answer the question. This isn't the presidential debates with rebuttals and this and that. If there's anything you feel that you want to address in the previous person's answer, you can put it in your next answer. We're not going to have a specific rebuttal time or anything like that. We watched the entirety of last week's debate, and so what we tried to do is develop questions here that were not duplicative with last week. So we wanted to cover like other areas, other things. There may be some duplicative stuff with hot topics, but generally we endeavored to cover different areas than what was covered last week. Some of you have submitted questions, and I'll try to factor those in. If they were close to an already scheduled question, I may not read your exact one. If I feel yours provides a good follow-up to an existing question, I may do that. So if you did submit and it doesn't, I'm not reading from your piece of paper, it's because it's factored in either into existing questions or I might use it as a follow-up to an existing question. All right?
Question.
Cool. Yeah.
Help me with this, what you said there regarding the lawsuit. Help me with what that is. Can you give me more information?
We have no information. I'll read her statement again. This is Ami's statement. While I would like to meet with all community members, I'll be unable to participate due to pending litigation against myself and the district. We are aware of no litigation.
I'm not aware of
There's certainly no event tonight that's a time conflict. And I've never heard, just as a person who's been on the planet a while, of any litigation that would prevent a public elected official from speaking to voters, which she did last Thursday at the League of Women Voters. So it's a very curious statement. Again, I'm editorializing. I'd rather she said it's date night with my husband.
Yeah.
I would believe that better. But that is her statement. I'm reading it, and then you can judge for yourself what that means about Ami and her point of view on this debate. All right, shall we?
Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you for taking the time to be here and moderate this.
And you can lead off with an opening statement.
Okay. Thank you to EdFirst for hosting this event, Megan and Charity. This takes a lot of work, and they've put a lot of thought and effort and energy into this. So I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. And thank you for everyone for showing up. I appreciate you taking time out of your evening to be here. My name is Alexandria Blumer. I am a former special education teacher for the Palos Verdes School District. I have 2 children who attend school here. I am running for school board because it's a wonderful opportunity to get involved in the community, to give back. And while I think our school district is fantastic, I think we have some areas of opportunity to make it even better. So I look forward to hearing your concerns and your thoughts and your ideas. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you to EdFirst. Thank you, Alan, for moderating, and thank you for all of you to show up here, and thank you to Alex for being here. I'm sorry that Eric and Ami couldn't be here. I very much enjoy a spirited, conversation, different ideas, looking at things, and I think the community is at a little bit of a loss for not being able to hear everybody's point of view tonight. My name is Jeremy Vanderhal. I grew up in Los Angeles. After high school, I went and I joined the Air Force, and I became a fighter pilot, a test pilot, a drone pilot. I was stationed all over the country and deployed all over the world. I've led large organizations of people, several hundred. I've worked with diverse groups of people, multinational. We're all working towards a specific goal. And I've been a leader in charge of executing programs that had budgets up to $2.7 billion. My last active duty station was here in California, which is where I met my wife, Katie, who grew up here in Palos Verdes. And rather than continue to move all over the country, we decided to separate from active duty and join the Air National Guard here in California and settle down roots in Los Angeles. When we decided that we wanted to settle down and create a home for having a family, it was a no-brainer. We came to Palos Verdes, where she grew up, specifically because of the schools. And now, years later, we have a daughter that just started kindergarten this year, and we are in it for the next 13 years. We're here. When I was in basic training, one of the things that I really liked about it was that it didn't matter where you came from, it didn't matter what language you spoke, your culture, anything. Everybody got the same haircut, everybody wore the same uniform, and we all started in the same place. And you rose based on your own merits, meaning how hard you work and how dedicated you were to it. And I think that's a beautiful analogy for America. And it doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right, anywhere in between. It's something we can all agree on. And that's also what I love about the school board. Ostensibly, it is nonpartisan. You won't see a D or an R next to anybody's name. And so that way we can focus just on the kids and the issues that affect the kids and our community. And so despite what some people may say, I don't think anybody stands against the principles that we hold dear. This isn't a bloody fight. We just have different views on how to attack problems that I think we all agree are problems, and we can focus on protecting the kids. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to fight to protect the kids. So my priorities are transparency and accountability. My job on the school board is to represent everybody here in the community. And so the way that I do that is by doing everything I can to do in public view so that you can see if I am accurately representing your wishes. And that one priority kind of affects everything. So after that, though, obviously we're a school district. So my next top priority is high academic standards, and then fiscal responsibility, and creating a safe learning environment for all the kids. So I'm excited to hear the questions tonight and be able to give you my opinions on these topics.
Great. All right, so first question, I'll let you start off this time. By the definition of running for the board, you are seeking a change on the current board. What about its current composition or the actions of the current board do you want to change?
Yeah, so absolutely, great question. Thank you for asking. So the main thing is lack of transparency. I think there have been multiple examples of the school board not conducting their business out in the open for people to see and bringing it behind closed doors. And generally speaking, so for those that don't know, there's a law in California called the Brown Act, and it governs how public governing boards are meant to function. And basically, the general rule is everything should be out in the open, and there is only a very few minor cutouts for where things can be discussed in closed doors. And examples are if there is pending or future or existing litigation, if there is a personnel matter, like if an employee needs to be terminated or something to that effect, and a couple other cutouts. But short of that, everything should be out in the open. And so what I have seen is that there are some examples of the school board using some examples of things that should be behind closed doors, but kind of widening that scope to say, well, if it's even tangentially related to it, we're going to go ahead and keep that hidden away from closed doors. And the reason, ostensibly, is because they don't want the public to have their opinions on record. And in fact, just yesterday, the school board had a special meeting with their lawyer specifically to essentially retrain them on the Brown Act. And a question was asked specifically, if there is a personnel matter, if there is something that needs to be discussed behind closed doors, does that prevent the board from discussing other topics related to it, but not that specific personnel matter in open session? And the lawyer said, yeah, you could totally talk about that in open session. So basically countering exactly what the board has doing. So my pledge is to change that and say, and instead of saying the default is behind closed doors and maybe we'll let things out in the open, the default should be following the law, which is everything out in the open with only a very, very, very narrow carve-outs for what should be behind closed doors.
All right, I'll repeat the question so you hear it again. What about the current composition or actions of the board do you want to change and why?
Yes. So transparency is certainly of utmost importance. I agree with everything Jeremy said. Most things should be discussed in open session. I think that the current governing board, with the exception of one member, has taken advantage of the closed door sessions. Something else I want to work on, a goal to improve, is building back the trust with the families. I think we forget, because it was such a horrendous time. COVID was not that long ago. It was just a couple years. And for me personally, my oldest son, I didn't get to go to his kindergarten graduation because it was COVID lockdown. And that's just my story. There's heartbreaking stories of kids missing out left and right. As someone who has showed up to multiple board meetings with concerns, I've never been contacted. My concerns have never been followed up on. And I want community members to feel heard. I don't want them to feel like they're just showing up to speak their 3 minutes and then they go to the next person. I want to follow up. I want to build these relationships. It's really important that we foster our partnerships with the parents, because that's what makes this district so special. That's what makes this community so special. I mean, where else do you get this turnout to meet your school board candidates? It's amazing. So I would like to give that back to our community.
Cool, thank you. All right, this is a follow-up on an issue that was brought up last week regarding contributions to your campaigns. Eric included in his answer that he received donations from local stakeholders. Now, stakeholder can be a tricky word because it can mean that there are groups outside the community who have a stake in what happens inside our community, and they use the word stakeholder to make it seem local. So we wanted to confirm with you guys, can you verify that you've received funds only from local PVP family, friends, and from no one who is not a local voter? I'll leave it up. You can answer that first.
I have only received donations from a few very generous people in this room, as well as my family in Arizona, and that's it. No special interest groups.
Most of my donations are from the local area. A lot of the ones that are out of the local area are people that I know personally. You know, when you're starting a campaign, the first thing you do is ask friends and family. So, so there's some from the local, wider LA area, and I'm sure from like other places too. Like I have for my graduate programs. I know there's somebody from as far away as Texas or other places too. But they're all the main point though is that they're all individuals. I have not received any funding from any political action committees helping me. So yeah.
I'm going to follow up my own question, leading to you first, Jeremy. Were you to win a seat on the board, would that commitment that may at least start now from grassroots, because you're starting out, and you go to family and friends. When you're on the board, what would your position be about accepting future contributions from outside entities?
Yeah, I would be wary of accepting donations from somebody I don't necessarily know that's outside the community. I certainly would accept donations from friends and family. So if I run again in 4 years, friends and family, you're more than welcome to donate to me again. But no, I think it's not really appropriate to take outside funds unless you have like a very extensive conversation with somebody. I don't want to say never, but like 99.9% never, because I would question why.
Cool.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we can't say with 100% certainty we never would, but 99.9% no. This is a nonpartisan position. And when you take money from someone like the teachers union, you're going to feel obligated to vote a certain way. When you take money from a state senator or an assemblyman or Congress, whoever it is, you're going to feel obligated to vote a certain way. And I don't believe that is appropriate for this position on the school board.
Thanks. All right, Alex, we'll start with you on this next one. How do you currently view the reputation of PVPUSD? And this can be in relation to anything like statewide rankings, testing, levels of college acceptance, community trust and support, and how would you change that perception if you see that it's off?
Overall, I think that Palos Verdes has a fantastic reputation. I spoke to it in my opening statement, how powerful this community is. I think that's what sets us apart in California is the community involvement and particularly parents. I did my schooling in Bakersfield. I went to Cal State Bakersfield, and the parents, the families were great, but a lot of them are working class. They were working. They didn't have the time to volunteer in the garden. They didn't have time to go to art at your fingertips. They wanted to. It's not that they were negligent, but they had to work. And so that's something that I think is very special and speaks to Palos Verdes' reputation. We have wonderful programs in our schools. And I think we've hit a little bit of turbulence the last few years. And I would like to clean that up, whether it be through fiscal responsibility, transparency, and connecting with the community, not just parents. I think that's what's really important is, as a school board member, of course, our children are of utmost importance, but we also have all these taxpayers, right? I mean, we have about 10% of the families in Palos Verdes have kids in the schools. We have an obligation and a commitment to represent all of the community members.
So academics and reputation-wise, we're doing very well. Like we're number 6 in the state for, and we have high graduation rates and college rates. So, and I talked about this at the last one, but I'll mention it here again. Something like 98% graduation rate, which is great. But then if you look at the standardized test scores for 11th grade, is the last data we have, is 20% of them are not meeting the standard for the state standard for English, and more than 30% are not meeting the state standard for math. And so what's really interesting and awesome about the community is everybody's very involved. I gave that statistic last week, and in the span of a couple days, a parent reached out to me with a theory as to why those numbers are low. And she told me that basically her child who was in high school really just didn't care about the standardized test because it didn't really affect their grade, but the SATs did for college, so they just clicked B for everything. And so that might be affecting it, and I don't know if that's true, but the point is, numbers-wise, if I didn't hear that story from the parent, if you look at the graduation rate compared to the standardized testing score, there's a big gap, and there's no judgment on anybody for that. It's not anybody's fault, but I would like to know why. And if it turns out that the reason is just because kids are blowing it off and just pressing B, like, okay, maybe we need to somehow incentivize them to actually take it seriously, because that's really one of the only ways that we can actually compare apples to apples between districts, right? Because grades are very subjective. It depends a lot on how teachers are grading that particular class, that particular year, and it's hard to compare those between districts. I will say one other thing to Alex's point about the community caring about the district is we are fortunate enough to live in a district that has enough families that are able to financially support through PEF and through PTA donations, stuff like that, in order to support all these positions that otherwise we wouldn't have based on the state funding. And so we are able to maintain that high reputation only by the grace of these families, which is great, but that's not the way it ought to be. And the reason why we're in that position is because we are getting very much the short end of the stick when it comes to financing. And I assume, Alan, you will ask a question about financing later, so I won't go too into detail on it now, but stay tuned.
Well, in a way, the next question was to talk about music and arts. It's been known for decades that music and arts training improves test scores, discipline, focus, mental health across the board. Currently, most music and arts in the district is supported by PEF. What, by your understanding, is the current status of music and arts funding in the district, and what would your plan be regarding that? You can lead off, Joe. So
we did actually just recently get a music and arts grant from California, basically on, I can't remember the name of it, but we do have a recent grant, and we are using that for arts. I would say though that we need to make sure that when that grant comes, we are actually using it for its intended purpose. There has been a tendency sometimes to have a grant and say, yeah, we'll use a little bit for what its intended purpose is, but other than that, it's just going to go into the general fund or boost salaries for teachers, which I'm all for, but not in this grant that is specific for an intended use. So definitely making sure that we are using grants for their intended fund.
I would absolutely prioritize making sure that grant does go where it's intended. Music and art is such a fantastic opportunity for our students to excel. Maybe, you know, my son, he does not excel at everything, but if drawing is his thing, then I definitely want to make sure that he has access and opportunities to art classes or music. He loves music and plays piano. So I think it's a wonderful thing, and I appreciate PEF. I hope everyone's coming to Toast on the Coast. That's their event. That's coming up on October 5th. So we really couldn't do a lot of these programs without PEF.
All right, essentially the same question, but targeted towards sports and athletics. Same benefits on discipline, focus, physical health, mental health. We hear a lot of questions about mental health that seem to have treated as a separate category, which it may well merit, but possibly at the expense of existing programs that improve the physical and mental health. So again, now with the sports and athletics, what is your understanding of current funding, and how would you change it if you could?
Currently, it's my understanding that most of our athletics are supported through booster clubs. So again, parents, PTAs, fundraising. I think it is so important to have sports and opportunities for children to sorry, if I seem nervous, it's because I am. I think it's important to allow children the opportunity to participate in the sports. And currently, our district contracted another year with Sage Therapy, and some of them are unlicensed therapists. I think this is not the best use of $750,000. I think that we could do a lot with our sports for that, because sports is a fantastic outlet for students. And to speak about mental health, because that is something that's very near and dear to my heart, I think everyone in this room would agree that it is. It's important for kids to feel like they belong somewhere. And we need to provide these opportunities. And I feel like the athletic clubs, the sports, it's an opportunity for kids to feel like they belong. It's an outlet for them. I personally do karate. I train Tung Sudo with my son, and it's fantastic. It's my version of therapy.
Jeremy, on sports and physics.
So my daughter also does karate. She's super cute. She's got her belt test this weekend. We're very excited for her. But what I love about it is that exactly what Alex was just talking about. It provides her a little bit of discipline, goal setting, a little bit of teamwork and fun and physical fitness. And I think those things all combined wrap into mental health. Now, I will say, when it comes to mental health, you know, Alex hit on Sage, stuff like that. But what's interesting is, so $750,000 a year, that's in addition to the approximately 50 mental health staff members that we have on staff in the district. So I'm not sure what extra benefit Sage gives above those 50 staff members. I was actually reading a really interesting article this week, and for anybody that wants it, I will forward it to you. Send me an email later. It was from the Manhattan Institute think tank, and they were doing a study on universal mental health for children. And what they kind of came up with is that, generally speaking, for schools, there's a lack of high quality evidence for school-based mental health. Not that it isn't good, but we don't know for sure that it reduces mental health conditions, and it doesn't necessarily improve academic outcomes. It primarily serves kids not that necessarily need mental health, but it also insufficiently serves those that actually do have mental health disorders. In addition, there's some potential unintentional harm or underestimated harms, like potential poor quality care through unlicensed therapists, misallocated spending, and potentially some reduced accountability for that. And then lastly, federal agencies that are responsible for the mental health, they don't have any guidance on what it means for a program to be effective, and so how to sort through all these different programs that exist and various initiatives. So I'm a numbers guy, and I talked about this last time as well. But if you're gonna design a program for the entire district regarding mental health, I would like to know, hey, what kind of numbers, what kind of metrics do you have to say that yes, it is working? And so my wife happens to be a psychiatrist, and I asked her that very question. She gave me a list of metrics that seemed really good. I presented to the board and said, hey, would we like to have that? Would we like to measure these? Have not heard back. And really the only way to know for sure what we're doing and if it's having any good, if it's having any effect, is by asking, like, for example, the SAGE program leaders. And that was submitted as a potential agenda topic, but we just found out last week that it was removed from the agenda list and was just going to be sent as what's called a Friday email, basically just a briefing from the superintendent to the board members. But thankfully, a board member caught it and put it back on there. And so it's just, I don't have judgment on it yet because I don't have numbers on it. So that's why I say open discussion, numbers, get some actual metrics to maybe prove that think tank study wrong. I would love to see that think tank study is wrong, but we can't because we don't have any numbers to back it up.
Thank you. All right, next question is on trust, which has come up both in previous answers. Alex, you mentioned it. The COVID lockdowns and the closing era and then the reopening era between 2020 and 2022, it fractured communities around the country, including this one, but particularly in relation to school closures and the terms upon which they would reopen and the protocols the kids had to go through upon that reopening. Many in this community felt that they were not being heard on their concerns and their objections about how this was being done, how it was being run by the board, and where was the board taking their money and their orders from. So a certain amount of trust was broken with a good chunk of the community on that count. How do you seek to win back that trust and ensure that it won't be broken in the future?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is exactly what I talked about in the beginning, is have everything out in the open. And I expect and I hope that even my staunchest supporter, if I'm not doing what you expect me to do, call me out on it. Like I don't want a yes man or yes woman to tell me that I'm doing a great job when I'm not. I have thick skin. If I'm doing something wrong, tell me, and I will be responsive to it. And that's how it's supposed to be. You know, we're supposed to be representatives of the people and not just shut out the people once we're elected. So I hope that everybody in this room and everybody that's watching, if you don't like what I'm doing, please come and tell me about it, and I'd love to hear from it so that I can make myself and make the district better for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think it all comes back to transparency. Putting some sunlight on it. We need to also acknowledge that we did not do right by our students. Having them wear masks outside, running track, it was ridiculous. You know, kids missing their graduation. I mean, kids missed out on athletic scholarships. I mean, there's such an impact. And I think that the governing board, I understand not everyone was on the board at that time, but you know, they owe the community at least an acknowledgement of, we are sorry, this was tough and we will do better. And if, God forbid, we get put in that situation again, we will handle it better. But again, it all comes back to just sunlight. Why aren't we talking about this openly? This should not be a secret.
I'm going to add my own follow-up to it, and I'll leave it with you, Alex. Should it happen again, a lot of what we heard during that time was a deference to some entity above. The county says X, and so we must do X, and there is no discretion. If that happens, what are you going to do?
I will fight against it. I will never, ever again put a mask on my child. That was heartbreaking. I will fight tooth and nail against it. I will not repeat what happened.
So I'm a military guy. I talk in military terms. So I view my role as on the school board as being the shield and the sword, and it applies for a lot of things. And in this case, basically what it means is if the county comes down and says, hey, or anybody for that matter comes down and says, hey, you guys should do this. I act as the shield for the district and try to insulate them and say, hey, is this actually what's best for our district? And if we don't have to follow that law, and I don't think that it's good for our district, then that's simple. We don't follow that. We don't follow it because it's not a law. The sword part comes in where if they try to add some teeth to it and make it an actual law and threaten us, now it takes that's where you know, electing a strong board member is important, because now you have to have a little bit of guts and be able to stand your ground. And if it comes down to the point where now they make a law and you don't want to follow it because you don't think it's good for your district, you really only have two choices. You either not follow it and wait for them to sue you, or you take the fight to them and say, nope, we're going to sue you because we don't want to do this. So long answer to a short question: protect the district, do what's right by us, and don't necessarily listen to everything that comes from outside if it's not good for us.
Thank you. All right, long-awaited question about the bond. Real simple. If Measure SOS passes, what is your plan to ensure that the funds are indeed spent on deferred maintenance and to guard against waste, fraud, and abuse in the implementation of that. You'll lead off, John.
So first off, thank you to one of the board members who was able to get some protections added to the bond language to make it more difficult for bad actions, I'll say, when it comes to spending the bond. The other thing I will say is, if people are very concerned about it, which they should, part of the bond is a citizens oversight committee. So I highly recommend to you that if the bond passes and you are concerned about it, everybody in this room should apply to be on that citizens oversight committee so that you can make sure that you keep a watchful eye over it. And part of that is us as well. So I think what we on the board can do is number one, my blanket priority is transparency, right? Everything should be out in the open so that everybody can see. There should not be any closed door meetings regarding this. In addition, every bid should be a sealed blind bid so that we don't know which company is doing it, so that there's no chance of impropriety of friends picking the friend's company or something like that. Everything should be on the up and up without any interference from the outside.
Thanks. Alex, again, if it passes, what is your plan to ensure that the right thing is done?
Transparency. It should be on the agenda before we sign any checks and pay for anything, approve anything. It should be discussed in open session. It should be put on the agenda. Multiple bids, sealed. Just echoing everything Jeremy said. I agree.
All right. The flip side. If Measure SOS fails, the district is still going to face tens of millions, perhaps 100 million or more, in significant deferred maintenance issues, some of them acute. What is your plan to address that if it fails? You can lead off, Alex.
So our buildings are eligible for state funding because of the age. They were built in the 60s, many of them. It's not going to be a lump sum of $300 million, but it is a start. I also believe community fundraising can be a very powerful tool. I know there are a lot of affluent, very generous people in this community, and I know that they will likely give more money than they would be taxed from this bond to a specific project if they knew exactly where it was going. The community wants to invest in their schools, and I think that's really important that we point out, because there is this narrative of, well, don't you care about our kids? Of course we care about our kids. That's silly. To say if we don't support a bond, we don't support our kids. That's ridiculous. We want fiscal responsibility. We want transparency. People are still, have their trust issues with the board. Everyone has their unique position and experience with the board. So I think a lot can be accomplished through community funding. I think there are some options. I was suggested not to bring it up, but potentially solar panels. I don't know. It's worth exploring. We need shade structures at a lot of our school sites, so that's an option. I don't know. We can look into that, but the bond is not the be-all, end-all. It's a $300 million bond is going to be the quickest, easiest fix, absolutely, but we need to pursue the root of the problem, and that also comes back to the LCFF, the local control funding formula. So all of your tax dollars goes to Los Angeles County, and it's distributed, and roughly each student in LAUSD gets $16,000. We roughly get about $10,000 per student. That's not equitable. We have an obligation as board members, as community members, to advocate for our children's constitutional right for equity. That's not equity. It should be penny for penny. And there's something right now that was filed by Goodwin Law Firm, and they are in the process of pursuing litigation. Let me get my trusty notes. I want to make sure I do right by this. So they have written on behalf of California public schools, their families, and the grassroots organizations who had been adversely affected by California's discriminatory and unconstitutional system of public school facility funding. So I think that's really important to fix the problem at the root. I think a bond is a Band-Aid, and we need to fix the problem. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Jeremy, again, if SOS fails, the district still faces tens of millions, perhaps 100 million or more in significant deferred maintenance issues, some of them acute. What would be your plan to address that?
Thank you. So first off, since it was brought up as one of the first options at the last debate, closing schools and selling land is like not an option. It is the back of the line. Don't even think about dimensioning it until we've exhausted every single other option. Because once that land is gone, it's gone forever, and who knows what will be put on it. High density housing is an issue, especially in our community, and there's a high likelihood that that's what be it used for. So we'd have to be in very, very dire straits for that to even be on the table. That said, before I talk about what I would do if the bond doesn't pass, I want to just quickly say that there's a difference between the replacement costs, which is what the bond would cover, versus deferred maintenance. So a lot of people have seen like the facilities master plan, and like the number that they came up with was something like 128 million, but the bond is like 300 million. So there's like kind of this disparity. Where does that come from? So I talked to one of the assistant superintendents who looked into it, and basically what it comes down to is that 128 million is maintenance. So like Band-Aids, like fixing roofs but not replacing roofs, fixing pipes but not replacing pipes, just like things to keep it alive for a couple more years until they can maybe replace it. The bond is replacement costs. So that's why there's a difference. And in theory, and no, not in theory, in reality, if the bond happens, then the the maintenance costs go down, because now they don't have to be continually fixing all these things that are breaking, because now they're hopefully brand new, and that part of the budget can go down. So there is a little bit of that side that I just want to dispel some of the rumors on that one. I will also say, generally speaking, I don't like taxes, and I don't like taxes in California, especially because they pull from us and spend on their pet projects elsewhere. But even the most conservative tax hawk could, in theory, get behind a bond, because it is one of the only cases in California where local bonds stay local and must be spent on what's on the list versus other taxes that get spent elsewhere or can be used for all sorts of things once the money's there. So to your question about what happens if we don't get the bond approved, there's a bunch of options. One of them is grants. We need to potentially have a bunch of grant writers try to get extra money, because there's all sorts of grant money out there. But to have enough people to write those grants, we either need to hopefully get volunteers. In fact, at the last debate, a person came up to me during the break and said, "Hey, I write grants as a living. I would love to volunteer to do that." So if there's any grant writers out there watching and you would like to help, please do it, because we might need it. And even if we do get the bond, it's great to have, because it's basically free money. Corporate sponsorships. We're in Southern California. We have all sorts of aerospace companies near us and tech companies near us. And they should and are interested in helping to develop like the next generation of STEM people that would then be essentially their employees in 4 to 5 years, something like that. So maybe corporate sponsorships, getting them to get in there. Community fundraising, like Alex talked about. Endowments. So right now, PEF is its own endowment, and then they take from it as necessary to support us. But maybe we look into creating our own independent endowment specifically for facilities and basically seeding it with the local community. But eventually it gets big enough to the point where it just feeds itself. You know, you talk to like Ivy League colleges that have these like hundreds of millions of dollars of endowments, and basically just on the interest alone, they use it to fund themselves. So if we can get to that point, then we essentially cut ourselves off from needing all these extra things, and we don't have to worry about that. Public-private partnerships, so getting private companies investing in there in order to basically get some other benefit from themselves. And then lastly, alternate forms of like revenue. So like we're already doing some of that as well. So we rent out our fields to like AYSO, and we get some revenue like that. So maybe think a little outside of the box. How can we use our campuses to generate extra revenue? It's not going to be like hundreds of millions, but every little bit helps. And then the only other thing there, that's revenue. The last part is just, when you're on a tight budget, you be a little bit more critical of your spending decisions and make sure that that nothing unnecessary gets spent money on, even if it's just $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Like in a $150 million budget, you think that's just drop in a bucket, but every little penny counts, especially when when our buildings are falling apart.
Yeah, follow up on that. Let's say, hypothetically, 5 million falls in your lap. A grant.
Yeah.
You found this grant. Where are you spending it?
So we should have a prioritized like emergency list of like, all right, if we have enough money for this project, we do that.
But I certainly understand that. But I'm looking more for like, here's 5 million. What is the infrastructure that you prioritize?
Yeah.
In terms of your awareness of what's
Sure,
going on in the district.
I don't have that much granularity into the specific projects, but it would be things that are safety related. So it would be like roofs that could potentially fall in, concrete that could potentially, electrical, plumbing. Again, I don't have that level of granularity, but like one of the first things I would want to do is create that prioritized list. Right now there is a project list, but to my knowledge, I don't think it is prioritized to be like, hey, here's the order and here's how much it costs. So we should definitely be doing that.
Alex, 5 million. What do you get to do?
I would address the electrical at Miralest. Miralest had to close for 3 days last year. Last school year, they lost 3 days of instructional time. So I think that's pretty high on the priority list.
Okay.
And that's going to be a very pricey project.
Cool. All right, more on the financing. Ami in last week's debate, at least then and maybe in more other occasions that I haven't seen her, she'll say that 85% of the budget is for staffing and teachers. And I find that there's a sort of it creates a sense of non-discretion. 85% is staffing and teachers, and you think, okay, well, I guess all of the discretion is outside of that. Where does the board have discretion within the PVPUSD budget, which is north of $150 million, I think? And what would you seek to change in terms of those funding priorities? You get to lead off.
So I also recall Ami saying that the board is currently spending 4% of the discretionary budget on facility maintenance. I would increase that. I think our facilities show that we're in dire need of that. So I would definitely prioritize that for the discretionary spending.
Cool. Again, where does the board have discretion, and how would you change it in terms of those priorities?
Just like any budget, there's some things that you cannot change, and that figure is probably about right. 85% is for salaries and wages. There are some like state mandated minimums, so like a minimum of 3% of the annual budget has to be spent on maintenance. So I definitely think, especially if the bond does not pass, that we need to potentially increase that. It's about reprioritizing all the rest of that. So there are some things that if I had unlimited funds, I'd love to give teachers raises. I'd love to give every kid a laptop. I'd love to have modern classrooms, everything. I'd love it, but that's not the reality we live in in our district, in our state, in our country. And so we need to at that time every year we need to prioritize, and it should not just necessarily be well, this is what we did last year, so this is what we're going to do this year. It needs to be an annual and probably even quarterly or maybe even monthly, like, hey, what is the no-kidding priority and where can we shift funds around that we have at this time? We do have a really great financial staff. They're overworked. A lot of people that are working on the budget and finances for the district do multiple jobs. And so it might be a force multiplier, as we say in the military, to get some extra people to help in on that, to basically find ways to find extra money that could be freed up for other things that are more high priority.
Cool. Thank you. Workforce housing. California is currently pushing districts to create what's called workforce housing for teachers and staff on land owned by the school systems. Some people may not know that this is a push. Where do you stand on that issue? I think you get to the out.
So yeah, obviously I'm very much against it. So here's the history on it, or like not really a history, it's happening right now, I guess. So on this ballot in November is something called Proposition 2. And I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically being marketed as a facilities bond to help schools with facilities that need facilities repairs. But it's a $10 billion bond, and if it passes, everybody's taxes in the entire state will go up. But there's a bunch of catches to it. Number one, it's matching only. So if that proposition passes and our local bond does not pass, our taxes will go up, but we will see none of that money because it will all go to other districts that do pass a local bond. Number two, if it does pass and our local bond passes, we will receive less money than other districts that also pass their local bonds, and that is because of the Goodwin letter, which basically a bunch of districts banded together with a law firm that I think worked pro bono for them to basically demand that California shift this Proposition 2, which, by the way, started off as AB, I think 247, which was written by our own representative, Almer Atsushi. So thank him for that. Basically forcing California, or strongly recommended, and they adapted it to basically make this sliding scale. So now basically it used to be based on these like proxy parameters like English as a second language or foster care, but now like the veil is gone and it's purely based on wealth. I think it even says the word wealth in it. So basically, if you're a wealthy district, you get less money. If you're even though you pay the same amount of taxes or probably even more. But here's the one that like the absolute nail in the coffin for me on Proposition 2. California State Superintendent of Education Tony Thurmond wants to earmark a chunk of it. I don't know if he said exactly how much, but a bunch of it for workforce housing on school property. And so the way that my understanding is the way that it's going to work is he'll like offer it as this like carrot, like, hey guys, do you guys want this facilities funding? I know you need it, but if you take it, then we get to build facilities, we get to build housing on your land. So again, that's why it takes a strong board with a sense of intestinal fortitude to not give in to that and basically take dirty money because the price of it is way too high. So short answer to your question, absolutely not. I do not stand for high density housing being built on school land.
Alex, is workforce housing.
Jeremy hit every point and then some. I don't believe that workforce housing is in the best interest of our community. Yeah, I do not support it. And I do want to say that I know that Julie Hamill worked really hard to put in some safeguards in the bond. So if the bond does pass, workforce housing is excluded from that money.
That's true. Sorry, can I actually say one more thing? I forgot to mention it. That okay?
If you're done, are you done now?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. So there is a general complaint, and I absolutely sympathize with it, that like because especially here in Palos Verdes, housing is so expensive, so the teachers that teach here can't afford to live here based on a teacher's salary, and I 100% sympathize with that. The solution to that is not to create this like high density housing. The solution is to have more money so that we can pay them a better salary and attract and maintain high quality teachers. But the way that we do that is by fighting against the state to get more money back that we are entitled to through the LCFF. And that's how we can, it's rising tide raises all ships, right? It's good for the teachers, it's good for the students, it's good for the community, it's good for the parents, and it's good for just the law and fairness.
All right, Alex, you're going to lead off on the response to the next question, which broadens it out from workforce housing, but to the general issue of local control. You talked about the LCFI. There seems to be a battle between local control within a community and what the state, as a money spigot, which then comes with obligations, requirements, and all of that. Where do you stand in general in terms of local control versus state, and how would you fight the state creep? You know what I mean? That they just are more and more coming in, usually with funding as the carrot and stick to get more control.
Right. I'm a big advocate for local control to local people. I do not think that the people in Sacramento should be making decisions about how to spend your tax dollars. And I'm sure we'll get into the curriculum also, but I truly believe in fighting for local control from the local people.
Your answer can include a curriculum if you want to. I'm not following up with curriculum,
Yes.
but if you want to address that.
So we get suggestions from the state, right? This legislature. I believe in constitutional rights. I believe in your rights, and I want to represent your wants and your views and your positions. So, can you please? I'm sorry, I'm going.
Well, the issue was local
control. Yeah, I want
to do to combat state mission creep and funding creep,
Yeah.
where they
vote in favor of the community. Vote in favor of local control.
Yeah, and basically, in other words, it takes guts, right? Because California is this big, behemoth, and they wield a lot of power, they wield a lot of money, they could threaten you, and it's easy to just say, okay, I'm just going to do what you say because I don't want to get in trouble and I don't want to look bad or whatever, or be in the news or anything like that. And then what ends up happening is you make bad choices for the community because you'd rather just take the easy route. And so it's hard. you have to stand up and you have to say, no, this is not good for my community. And if that means in the short term, maybe we are hurt a little bit because we're not getting extra funding that they're using to trick us into doing something that we don't want to do, fine. But in the long run, we'll be better off because we are keeping the community's interests at heart versus what the state thinks is best for us.
Cool. All right, next topic, conflicts of interest. Have you observed or are you aware of any conflicts of interest that may currently exist between the district and outside entities, consultants, vendors, etc.? I think you're actually on the turn of the
yeah, couple examples. Everybody's aware of Sage, which is the therapists that we have contracted out that Alex mentioned, about $750,000 a year. The origin story of it, though, the first year that we got them, the assistant superintendent at the time it's kind of unclear, either she was on the board or she was very close friends with somebody that was on the board of the company that we hired. And so that was a little shady at the time. I don't know if it was even brought up by anybody, but it was discovered later on. And so that in and of itself warrants like, hey, did we get this contract legitimately in the first place? Which is, by the way, why we should have sealed bids because of exactly that reason. So it's questionable about that. The other one too, and so here's the deal on our the law firm that represents us. So we have the district has a law firm that they contract to represent them. A subsidiary of that law firm is a superintendent search firm. So when the superintendent search firm that was used by the district when we found Dr. Serrano is the one that's the subsidiary of it. So obvious conflict of interest, because when the board then goes to the law firm that says, hey, give us objective legal opinions on these candidates, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest built in because their own subsidiary is the one that is doing the search. And a board member at the time brought that up and said, hey, we should at least think about maybe splitting those up so that we have a legitimate and no conflict of interest process. And she was voted down 4-1. And what that does then, it casts a shadow over the whole process. And Dr. Serrano's been doing a decent job, but everybody has now like this question mark, like, hey, why did she get hired? I don't know. And so the whole process needs to be just anything like that. Those are examples of conflict of interest that if it gets brought up, it should be given more attention. And in the past, basically, every time it has been brought up, it was shot down 4-1, and business continued as usual.
All right, Alex, have you observed or are you aware of any conflicts of interest that may currently exist between the district and outside entities?
Yeah, I was going to mention the superintendent. I also believe there's been a few conflicts of interest in promoting this bond SOS with people outside of our community. Workforce housing, that concerns me when we have our teacher union rep showing up, advocating and pushing for the workforce housing. But I think Jeremy, again, did a fabulous job addressing that.
Okay. AI. Anecdotally, it would seem, I have the 3 kids and I ask around and I talk to my siblings who have kids and stuff like that. It would seem that AI has its positive aspects, but that the students are learning primarily to disguise its use as their own organic work. So they know enough to know AI and they know enough to know how to not get caught using it. How can the district address this as this technology continues to expand? Alex, you go.
So obviously emphasizing ethical use of AI is the first line of defense. Teachers need to really put strict boundaries and expectations in place of their students. There's also a tool called turnitin.com. And you have to upload your written work to this website and they scan through it. And so it'll give you a percentage of how much was possibly plagiarized. And I think that's a fantastic tool. But unfortunately, this is uncharted territory. This is new, so it's going to be a lot of trial and error. But I think those are a couple ways that we can hopefully combat that.
Yeah. So Alex mentioned there's plagiarism detectors. I don't know if there's AI detectors yet, or if they are, how reliable they are. But it's definitely that's a technological solution that we could look into. But short of that, it's always a cat and mouse game. Like when I was in high school, the way that all the kids were cheating back then was by writing their answers in their TI-85, and because you had to have your TI-85 for the math class. But then it's a cat and mouse game, right? So people come up with a way to cheat, and then they come up with a way to stop you from cheating. So we need to be creative on that. So in addition to these technological solutions, maybe come up with ways to create assignments that would preclude AI from being an advantage in the assignments. And that's, I don't know if that necessarily falls under district policy, or if there are organizations out there that are thinking about this already that we can contract with to help basically give maybe professional development to teachers to help with basically building assignments that would do that.
School board responsiveness. Currently, the district invites online questions regarding its agenda items, but many feel that they are typing their questions into a void and it's a black hole and they never hear anything back. Where would you stand on whether the board should respond in some way, even if it's someone delegated to respond, to every question that legitimately addresses agenda items, whether online or in person? Jeremy, you get to lead. Sure.
I will say, the response from current board members is a mixed bag. There are some board members that usually if I have an issue, I write to all of them, and usually there's one or two that will consistently write back, and some that will almost never write back. So my goal is to be one of the people that always writes back. I lost my train of thought. Apologies. Yeah.
A way of would you commit to, or is there a way that the school board could respond
Yes.
to everything online?
Yes. So first, regarding in person, they are limited to a certain extent. They are limited to a certain extent. Like during the non-agenda items, when the people are out there talking, they can't respond. But they can respond later on in their own comments if they're ready to do that. The other thing too that I think is just a kind of more broad general way to get the community's feedback onto it. The current way that agenda items are selected for discussion is a joint decision between the board president and the superintendent, and that's it. Other board members can suggest or request them, and they go into a hopper, but then the actual selection of them is by the board president and the superintendent. So one of the things that I would recommend is let's take a look at the policy that does that and see if maybe we can revamp that to be a little bit more inclusive, so that there isn't this close hold over what gets talked about. There are some things that are necessary to talk about, like budget cycles and things that come up, but especially when it comes to controversial issues or things that the community cares about, which has happened, and people are screaming to talk about this thing, and the board just never talks about it. Maybe there's a way that we can do that so that it's a little bit more equitable in that regard.
Alex, school board responsiveness.
I think it's really important to respond to the written comments, to any comments or concerns that are submitted. It would be up to the discretion of the board if it's worth responding to or not. Not every comment you can really respond to, but I think delegating, making sure that someone is on top. Okay, at this board meeting, we're going to need so-and-so to make sure you respond to these topics. We've had some board meetings that are flooded with comments afterward, and then some board meetings where there's one or two. So I think just delegating and making sure there's some accountability that people are responded to, and I think that would be a huge bonus in building back the trust with the community so they feel heard.
Cool. All right, the great spring 2024 yearbook fiasco at PV High School. Without getting into the specifics of the controversy itself, and you can address this as part of the answer to the question, where do you see the breakdown? Where was the breakdown? You'll lead off, Alex, and that occurred there, and how would you address it as the board?
Yeah, so the teacher that was responsible for overseeing the editing of the yearbook, there should have been protocols in place. We need board codes, education codes, that protect, because it also protects the teachers, right? Because we don't want the teachers to get in trouble, but we need to hold them accountable, and we need to be clear about our expectations that we are not going to print and distribute propaganda. It seems like it would be a no-brainer, but apparently it wasn't. So I think the breakdown happened there in the classroom. That teacher really dropped the ball.
Yeah, so there's a difference even just between PV High School and Peninsula High School, right? Peninsula High School doesn't do those kinds of like news/opinion articles in their yearbook, but PV High School does. And in fact, something I heard like secondhand, so I can't verify that it's true, but like supposedly the teacher in charge of Peninsula was like, yeah, I would never do that because for exactly this reason. I can't verify that. It's word of mouth. But it makes sense, right? Like for exactly this reason. So when you have an incident that happens in one school and it wasn't even possible to happen in the other school, you look at why is that? And so it comes down to policy. And so if one specific action that can come from this is, hey, school board should create a policy that says, for yearbooks, controversial issues should remain out. It should be a nice, memorable keepsake that everybody loves taking home and everybody signs and you look at. Wouldn't it be nice if the school board talked about it? Because everybody wants to. To be clear, I don't think that the student should be punished. I don't think that the teacher should be punished. I think this is a teaching moment for everybody because a lot of people that read the article thought, it's not anti-Semitic. What's the problem? It's just opinion or fact or whatever. When in fact it actually is very anti-Semitic, and there was a huge paper put out by a group that I'm involved with, basically point for point countering, showing why almost every line in it contained falsehoods and anti-Semitic tropes. And so the fact that it was written and reviewed and nobody seems to have a problem with it just shows that just a lack of education on this specific topic. But we could have avoided this whole problem by having a policy. So the school board should talk about what that policy is. They currently have not, and the reason they have not goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning about transparency, because they initially said, well, we can't talk about it because there's open litigation, because there was somebody that filed a Title VI complaint against the district. That Title VI complaint was resolved and settled on August 28th. There was another school board meeting on September 11th, and it was still not agendized then. And then last week, the board president said that the reason was not just because of litigation, but now an investigation. So suppose the only word that I had that there's any kind of investigation at all about this particular incident was one quick part of a line in an email that the superintendent set out about an investigation. And I've heard word of mouth from people that the reason why it's taken so long is because over the summer, all the people involved went home or went on vacations and you couldn't reach them. And that's, if that's the reason, that's the reason. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's not the point of this. The main point, though, is that litigation and investigation, according to the district's own lawyer from yesterday, said does not preclude a discussion on, protocols and policies related to it. So my personal opinion on this is that the board didn't want to talk about it because it looks bad, right? It's not a good look for them to talk about this in person or to have their opinions on public record, and so they hide it and they use these excuses, and so that obviously needs to change.
Cool. We're almost done. 4 more questions. Sex ed. Within the sex ed curriculum that is delineated by state mandates, etc., there can be plenty of debate, and parents generally have the ability to opt out of that. Mm-hmm. This question concerns any improvisational or sort of quasi-intentional improvisational sex ed that's happening outside of the official curriculum, either through commentary during history class, during literature class, selection of angles to take in those areas where a teacher may be able to advocate for their own sort of sex ed program in the class. Where do you stand on that? I think you start off.
Yeah. So real quick, talking just about sex ed, the law is pretty clear, but even though the law, in my opinion, is pretty clear, there's still some controversy on it. In fact, at one of the board meetings a month or two ago, or maybe it was at the end of last year, they were talking about like updating this policy, talking about what specific sections of sex ed parents can opt their kids out of. And the law seems pretty clear to me. It said something to the effect of like any and all lessons that they could pull out of. I don't remember the exact wording, so don't quote me on that. Law seems pretty clear to me, but one or two board members in particular said no, because if you pull out, now you're being biased against a certain group of a certain community. And so I think, in my opinion, the law is very clear, and so we should follow the law. Now regarding outside sex ed, again, the law is very clear. There are there's first of all, the main controversy happened in 2023, early 2023, when a teacher read and assigned a book that was not on an approved list, and it contained a pretty controversial topic that was tangential to basically sex ed, and parents were upset about it, and a lot of people came to the board basically in defense of it, but basically changed what the actual thing that they were upset was about. Everybody was saying, "Oh, you're trying to ban a book. You're trying to ban a book." And after all the comments were done, a board member asked the superintendent for clarification: "Is anybody here trying to ban a book?" And the answer was no. And so people got very upset over something that actually was not an issue. The way that we solved this, and it was solved, was re-emphasize that you do not select books that are not on your approved list because exactly this reason, and we move on with our lives. Like, so, yeah.
Cool. Alex, improvisational sex ed outside of the opt-out.
Absolutely not. It is outside of the teacher's jurisdiction. If they are in history class, they have no business improvising or providing supplemental material about sexual health. I believe in setting parameters. There have been instances where teachers have books on their shelf called, for example, Sex is a Funny Word, and it goes into masturbation and anal sex and really inappropriate things that I don't want my child to be exposed to. And someone might counter that by saying, well, they're going to be exposed to it eventually. Well, my 8-year-old is eventually going to have a driver's license. I'm not going to throw him the keys tonight, you know, when it's time, and it should be to the discretion of the parents, because thank you, ma'am. I am the expert on my child. I have the utmost respect for teachers. My mother was a teacher, a second grade teacher for 20 years. She is the expert at that. I was the expert when I was teaching. The parents are the experts in their children, and they should have the final say. Absolutely no improvisation, no supplemental material, nothing outside of the state law. And that is a hill I will die on.
All right, thank you. 2 more questions, then the closing, and we're pretty much done. Data mining, many free services, extensive health questionnaires, and surveys of the parents can involve the data mining industry. What is the district policy currently on data mining? What is your position on providing any student family data to entities outside the district? Alex, you start.
I am not currently aware of what the district's policy is with data mining. I personally do not support it. I do not want my child's data up for sale. I don't want my family's data up for sale. As a board member, that's something that I would fight to protect.
So at last week's board meeting, they had on the agenda something about a new anti-bullying program that is being potentially and is going to be piloted at Silver Spur and Dapplegray. And what I didn't like about how it was presented was it was basically like, you have to vote on it now because if we don't give them an answer soon, we're going to get dropped out. And basically it gave the board no time really to really consider it and think about it and get follow-up materials. And in fact, the only material that they got from this program was the survey that they were going to ask all the kids. And in fact, everybody on the board agreed that the survey was inappropriate. It was asking like 3rd graders like sex questions, which was like way not okay. In addition, so the reason why this was like a good thing was because it was free for us. Like basically it's no cost, but nothing's ever really free, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. So the cost that goes with it is they're doing research and they want to see how effective this anti-bullying campaign program is. But the cost of that is that the data goes to the county, the LA County, who's running this. And so when you go to the LA County's website, the first thing that pops up is it says, "We were just a victim of a data breach. Please contact us if you are concerned." So I'm very concerned about this, and unfortunately, again, as is the trend, this was approved 4-1. The only voice of reason, in my opinion, voted for it, or voted against it rather. And so we need to keep that in mind, right? You know, kids need to remain innocent. My daughter needs to, not have her data out there swimming around it. Who knows what else? It's obviously very important.
Cool. Parental permission. Currently, more formal programs like music and sports require parental permission for the student to sign up. Should there be required permission for any and all student extracurricular activities, mostly regarding the many clubs that can center around controversial political or social agendas, but basically should we build a permission wall around all activity or keep it at pretty much where it is, which is music, sports, field trips, etc.? Jeremy, you lead off.
At first glance, it sounds like a decent idea to me. I haven't really taken too much time to think about that. But yeah, and especially because, exactly what you said, there are some clubs, I mean, there's some that are like just regular any old day clubs, but there's some that are hot button issues, and I'm fully supportive of kids being involved in things that are important to them. But I don't think it's too much of a stretch to ask, hey, if any club that you want in, don't limit it only to what people consider like the controversial list. It's just every club. You bring it home for a parent signature, and if a parent really has a problem with it, then it's worth a conversation, and that's a conversation to be had between the parent and the kids, and that part of the conversation is none of our business.
Cool. Alex?
Yeah, can you read the question again?
Yeah, sure. Currently, more formal programs like music and sports require parental permission for the student to sign up. Should there be a required parental permission for any and all student extracurricular activities, particularly surrounding clubs? So this is mostly middle school, high school, where the kids, there's that day where they can sign up for a million things. You may not know what they've signed up for, and you may have an issue with that.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes. Parents should have to sign off on any club or group that kids are participating in on public school campus. I find it concerning that anyone would have a problem with that. It's as simple as a permission slip. It's disclosing to parents what their kids are involved in. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Cool. Final question, then you can do a closing. This is about district communication. I know for me, with 3 kids, 3 schools, currently between each school, Aries, the principal, the superintendent, parent square, PEF, etc., we are under a deluge, a flood of email and other kinds of communication. What do you think the district could do better to handle the flow of communication, particularly so that permissions and opt-outs come to the top and I'm not missing out because of the flood of an opt-out on something I want to opt out on? You get to lead the response.
Me?
Yes.
Okay.
That is a really good question, because I do think that our district does do a fantastic job communicating everything with parents. I have a first grader and a third grader, and we get lots of emails, and I appreciate them keeping us in the loop. As far as prioritizing, I think that they're doing a decent job. I really do. There was a security scare today, and we got emails. I think it's really up to the parents to read it and keep up on it. So I think also any urgent matter should be sent from one source. So I don't think it should be on parent. I have that parent square too. You have to sign in Aries, and there's all kinds of weird. It should be very clear, and I think it should come right from the PVPUSD superintendent.
So the board is still working on, or just approved. It's in the final stages of their official communications plan that they've been working on for months. And hopefully, if and when it is implemented, it will smooth things out. I think overall it's going pretty well, but there's a few instances where it certainly can be improved. And even if it was, quote, perfect, there's always it's always continuous improvement. You never just sit back and rest on your laurels. I'll give a recent example of where communication didn't go as great, and maybe think about how to work that into updating the communication. So last week there was some sort of security incident at PV High School in the afternoon or evening. And so much so that it required calling Lomita sheriffs. So we don't know what it is. The following day, like in the late afternoon, after kids had already gone to school and had been in school all day, that's when the principal sent out an email saying, hey, by the way, last night something happened. We called the sheriff, but everything's fine. So I think the default for communication should be early and often and as much as possible, because parents deserve to know. And even today with the safety incident, yes, it got sent out. But again, it's like, hey, there's a general threat, but we don't think there's a specific threat, so everything's good. And it feels almost like we're being spoken to like kindergartners. Like, hey, don't worry, everything's fine. Like, give me the information. Like, I want to know. Like, if it's unless it's like something that like because of the nature of the threat we can't tell you because it might make the threat worse, then I understand. But like, hey, if it's something, give me all the information and let us decide if it's something that we want to know or not. Don't curate it for us.
Great, thank you. All right, closing statements. I believe who spoke first?
Yes.
You spoke first, so
Okay.
Jeremy.
So first of all, thank you everybody for coming out, and thank you for moderating, and thank you for hosting. I'm very sad that Eric and Ami weren't here, because I think Alex and I see eye to eye on a lot of topics. I actually enjoy talking with people that I disagree with on things, because through this back and forth, you actually find out the best solution. Maybe my solution is not the best, maybe their solution is not the best, but by talking to each other, we can. And by not coming to the community, I think that does everybody a disservice. I really real quick want to just say, last time in the closing statements, I was accused of using a community's pain for my own political gain, and I was told to keep divisive issues away from the boardroom. What I want to say is there will be divisive and controversial issues, right? It would be great if the school board could just do boring things every day and we just run the schools. But things will happen that are divisive and controversial. But by hiding it, you don't make them go away. You have to address them head on. You have to bring them out in the public for everybody to see and everybody to discuss, so that the community can rightly judge how you're doing. And so my promise to you is, if there is something divisive and something controversial in the community that needs to be talked about, I will talk about it. There's a lot at stake here, and we need a board that can be trusted, and that's how you can engender that trust, right? So we need a board that can be trusted to represent the community and the parents, and we need a board that can be trusted to prioritize protecting kids over protecting their own reputation. So again, thank you to everybody for coming out. Thank you for the questions. If you didn't get your question answered, go to my website, www.vanderhal4pv.net. I have some answers on there, and if you still don't find the answer you want, please email me. I love it, and I love being challenged. So if you disagree with me, tell me, and let's talk. We'll meet for coffee or something. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan, for your time tonight and all the questions. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. EdFirst, thank you for hosting. I really hope that I get an opportunity to serve on the school board, because I want to represent, first and foremost, children. I think our society has gotten to the point where we're so scared to speak out about things that we believe in, because we don't want to be name called. And I think it's really important to have someone with a backbone and integrity that is willing to be the bad guy. And I'll do it. If it's in the best interest of a child, I will do it. So I hope that I get your vote, and I appreciate everyone being here. Thank you so much.
Great. Hand for those who- And then just a reminder to all of you, on the ballot, there's 2 open seats. You have 2 votes to cast for 2 people to fill 2 seats.
And there are
2 people here. This is a coincidence. Use your votes. Put 2 more people on. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Now.